was as if the surface of it was just perfect glass. At this point, the cowboy is only about 30 feet from us and he's slowing down. So at least he's planning on stopping and not just running through us. And right before he started talking, I just thought to myself how odd it was that the lake had no ripples. And I just watched 10 large birds hop in, not so gracefully. And as I was trying to start to make sense of it, this cowboy looking man just starts venomously shouting, "Get away from him, you devil." This cowboy-looking man just starts venomously shouting, "Get away from him, you devil." And he's just repeating himself a couple times as his horse is skidding to a stop. And I felt Junior grab the back of my leg right as the cowboy got there, as if Junior was genuinely scared of this man and was hiding behind me for protection. This was the first time Junior showed any real fear today. Even with the big one flying overhead, he was pretty nonchalant. This was different. He was scared. The way that he was grabbing my pants showed me that Junior knew who he was, and he was bad news. Clearly, Sam was already on edge here, and this man approaching us with such aggression sent him over the edge, because he clapped back at this guy, doubling his aggression and intensity. I'm not going to repeat what he said, but this man was clearly shaken to his core how Sam just met him at his level. It reminded me of this one time I was walking in downtown Chicago, and this one crackhead was just acting crazy and screaming, and everybody around him was scared and running away, until one random guy just matched his crazy and just challenged him, screaming in his face. And the crackhead just immediately backed down. And right after the guy that did it to him walked past me, just said, "Gotta match their crazy." And in this situation, the cowboy man immediately looked embarrassed and scared of Sam. And I'm not going to repeat what Sam said because it was so matter of fact and threatening and borderline not appropriate. Just kidding. Sam said, "1 foot closer and we'll drag you off that horse. And I'll tie you to that golf cart and I'll drag you across every inch of this ranch." And I'm just standing there like, yeah, what he said, just trying to look as menacing as possible. And the man immediately started explaining himself and acting much more civil. He just goes, "Boys, I'm not here to hurt you. There's a devil in your presence and you ought to know before he makes you one too." We weren't hearing it. I just wanted to know who this guy was and how he could help us get off this ranch. So we just start walking to either side of him, basically threatening him with our body language, just showing him that we were fully prepared to escalate this into something physical if he was not to comply. And Sam just goes, "You have 1 minute to explain why you're more valuable to us than him." And he points at Junior. I wasn't expecting him to do that, but after I heard him say it, I was like, that's a pretty good tactic. Even though Junior had been relatively helpful today, it was a high IQ move to pit this guy against Junior, to make him think that we were ready to take his side as long as his information was good enough. Junior did not seem to like that Sam did that, and I saw his facial expression change from a scared, innocent kid to a blank, menacing stare. And he was clearly faking before, because how quickly what looked like terror in his face faded to what looked like aggravation. He just seemed pissed that he didn't have our full trust anymore. Now I was even more interested in what this man is about to say, because it was very clear that Junior was terrified of us listening to him. And the cowboy just starts off by stating that he's not a cowboy. He goes, "Listen guys, I'm a ranch hand here. I'm the former owner of this ranch, but I stayed on the ranch to see this thing through. My family was tormented here for years and we were laughed at when we went to others for help. I begged authorities to help us and we were publicly humiliated and ignored. And when I finally got an interested buyer, I had to be honest with them about what was happening here. And those men informed me that my public reports where I was humiliated were the reason that they were buying it. They were funded by a private corporation that was planning on studying the ranch, and their goal was to find proof that something strange was happening here. And when I found out that they weren't just looking for property and they actually believed me, I begged them to let me stay on the property so I could help with upkeep and they could just focus on their studies. I just wanted to help guide them while staying close to their findings." And Sam just cut him off and said, "So what do you have against our tour guide here?" And the ranch hand turns his attention towards Junior and starts gritting his teeth, and he actually spits at Junior before saying, "I warned them not to talk to it. I warned them not to listen to its lies. That is no boy. That is the devil himself." Sam borderline snarls at him and he just goes, "You better get more specific." The ranch hand gives Sam what he wants and he just replies, "I'm not sure how long y'all have been out here, but I could see it in your eyes that you've seen things that change a man. Ask yourselves this. Why is that boy keeping you out here? Why not lead you back to headquarters if he knows the place so well? I'll tell you why. I've seen them leave people out here till they break, until you have so many questions going through your mind that you'll do anything for the person that gives you answers. This isn't a tour, this is an initiation." I butt in because this guy thinks that we're weak and gullible enough to be recruited into the weird cult that they have at headquarters. So I defensively reply, "Bro, we're not joining a weird cult. Do I look incompetent to you?" And the ranch hand gets aggressive with me and snaps back, "Those people are not a cult, they're consumed. All they are is extensions of it. Did they seem like individuals to you? At any point, did you feel like you were talking to somebody new? Did they have you meet the team? Did the team introduce themselves? Or did every interaction blend into the next as if it was all rehearsed? He ends his interrogation by pointing at Junior and saying, "And what's his name this time?" And we both look over to Junior, who's still just standing there glaring at this man. Like this man is Junior's mortal enemy. And Sam just replies, "His name's Junior." And the ranch hand sarcastically goes, "Oh, Junior. Oh, hey, Junior. You didn't even bother giving this body its own name this time, huh? Is it too much to keep track of? You see that this sweet boy's name used to be Matthew until these imbeciles started making deals with the devil." And I noticed a clear shock on Junior's face after the ranch hand said the name Matthew. It was as if he was allergic to the name and he was having a visceral reaction to hearing it. And he just started screaming. The ranch hand noticed his reaction, so he just started viciously repeating Matthew. He was saying it through his teeth because his jaw was so clenched with anger. But when he said Matthew the second time, Junior just took off and started sprinting towards the lake. And before we even had the chance to catch up to him, he was already swan diving into this lake with no hesitation. And I'm just standing there so confused as to why this kid would attempt to flee through water. He could have ran in any direction. He knows this place better than any of us, but he chose the water. And I'm looking at his entry point into the water, and I just see that it settles to almost completely still immediately. And he's showing no sign that he's resurfacing anywhere anytime soon. There was no splashes or bubbles or a wake from him swimming away. The water is just clear glass again. And then I realize that the penguins haven't made a second appearance yet. We didn't hear them splashing or resurfacing this entire time. There was no sign of them and there was no sign of Junior. But the only difference is that penguins can hold their breath for 30 minutes. And Junior's just a kid. He's just a human kid. So I start to get very concerned after 30 seconds of him not resurfacing. So Sam and I look at each other. We have no choice but to sprint up to the edge of the lake. And we had to jump in. Junior was drowning. We're both ready to jump in after this kid until the ranch hand shouts at us. "The boy won't drown as much as I wish he would. Do not jump in after him. You have no idea what kind of water you'll find." So I whip my head back towards him, absolutely flustered, because I feel like every second that we wait, Junior's sinking further to the bottom, completely helpless. And I just go, "If you don't tell us what's going on, we'll put you in there. And you don't know what kind of water you'll find." I was just sarcastically mocking his riddled warnings and threatening him, straight up threatening him. I was so sick of riddles at this point. I'm fully prepared to waterboard this dude for answers like we're in Zero Dark 30. Whatever it takes, because we're no closer to getting out of here since he arrived. The only thing that's changed since this guy showed up is that now we're looking at a missing kids case, where we could get locked up for manslaughter or negligence. And I could see that the ranch hand is clearly feeling the pressure for our current aptitude for violence. So he puts both his hands up in a response to try to get us to calm down, and he replies very calmly, "Just put your heads in the water and open your eyes and you'll start to trust me. The only thing that I want is for you to get off this ranch safely." We don't have much time before it's potentially too late to save Junior. So I tell Sam to keep an eye on the rancher while I stick my head in. We don't need both of us dunking our heads in this lake so this guy could potentially get the jump on us or run off. Sam obliges right away because he understands the gravity of the situation and the time constraints to get it done. So I have the green light to dunk myself, so I quickly just get on my hands and knees. And I just jam my head into the water with my eyes wide open. From the surface, the water didn't seem very clear. It would even be considered a little bit murky, so I wasn't even expecting to be able to see a foot in front of me. But it was like a different world. Not just the fact that the water was completely crystal clear, but the fact that it was teeming with life. There was thousands of fish, and I could see every inch of this lake clearly. It was beautiful in there, but it didn't really seem like a lake. It looked more like the ocean to me. It looked like the coral reefs off the coast of Australia that they show you on planet Earth. I swear to you, it could not have been more beautiful. So much so that I was briefly distracted as to why I was looking in here in the first place. And then I remember I'm looking for a drowning boy, so I start scanning the lake for any sign of him. And then I noticed something so odd. At the bottom of the lake, I noticed something that looks like a half bubble of clear plexiglass with what seems to be tiles on the other end of it. And I'm just staring at it, holding my breath until I see movement on the other end of it. And it's a group of kids under it, looking up at it, pointing at fish as they swim by. They were wearing backpacks and lanyards, and they looked as if they were on a field trip to the aquarium. They were under the lake, looking up into it through plexiglass on a field trip. So many thoughts are running through my head, and the first one being Junior swam directly down and went through whatever exit that is underneath us. And the second thought was that me and Sam were right about hearing something under us in the last spot, and we should have kept digging. And Junior stopped us because he knew that we were gonna get away. So I rip my head out of the water and I yell at Sam, "We were right, dude. There are people under us. There's something under us." I see little kids looking up into the lake as if it's an aquarium. We both look back towards the ranch hand because I want to see what he's about to say, and he's shaking his head. He says, "You don't get it, do you? Look again." And I look at Sam confused because I thought this guy was gonna continue did confirm to us that we shouldn't have listened to Junior, and we should have continued digging before and escaped. But he wasn't saying that. He was telling me to look again. And this man was looking at me as if he pitied me. And I didn't like that. I didn't like the way he was looking at me, so I stuck my head back in to see what I missed. Like, what is going over my head here? What am I not seeing in this situation? But the second I opened my eyes the second time, with my head inside the water, I realized that this is not a lake. This is not even water. This was something so far beyond my understanding. I say that because when I opened my eyes for the second time, all I saw were quarters. Just quarters lining the floor about 2 feet away from my face. There was no fish, no reefs, no deep, vast lake, just a small, white painted, clearly man-made floor filled with quarters. And I dipped my head a little bit deeper so I would be able to turn my head to look back through the surface of the water without my eyes leaving the water. And I see everything I need to confirm my suspicions. I see what clearly resembles high-rise buildings with dozens of people walking up to the edge of the water and just flicking coins in. This was a fountain surrounded by tourists flipping coins into it, clearly in a metropolitan city, and I could clearly see the outline of gloves and scarves as if it's winter where they are. I yank my head out of the water again, and I immediately shake my head and face to try to get the water off my hair just naturally, and I realize that I'm shaking dry hair and my head's not even wet, and the only words that I could get out are, "What is that?" Not nearly as aggressive as I was a minute earlier, and Sam and the rancher can hear the defeat in my voice from what I just realized. Sam tries to ramp the aggression back up by repeating what I just said in like a half yell, even though he had no idea what I was referring to because I didn't even bother mentioning the change underneath the surface. But it was good that Sam pressed him again because it seemed as if it was the best way to get information out. Because for some reason, people here like to keep you in the dark about what's going on by being as vague as possible, and the only way to get them to cough up some information is to be as aggressive as possible. You have to yell and threaten them to get even a morsel of information from them. So the rancher finally coughs up some answers by saying, "I wish I knew, boys. The surface never changes, but what's submerged never stays the same. I can't tell you what that is, but I can tell you that there's no aquarium under us. And I could tell you that nobody here has the answers, even if they tell you that they do. I could take you to every odd corner of this ranch and introduce you to every creature we got, but I'm not gonna lie to you and tell you that I have the slightest clue of what's going on here. But the devil will. The devil will try to convince you that he has the answers, but he don't." Sam yells at him again and he just goes, "If you don't know anything and you don't want anything from us, then why are you here?" And the rancher finally says something that gets through to us. He just says, "I'm here to help poor schmucks like you get off this godforsaken ranch." It still seemed like he was withholding information from us. He said it himself. He could show us every inch of this ranch, which means he knows everything about it, but he just wants to help us get off. And with Junior gone, he was our best option. We were just sitting ducks here. There's nothing we can do. We literally had no other option but to give this guy a chance. But I didn't want him to feel too comfortable, like he completely won us over, so I just gave him a lazy threat. "Get us to headquarters and we won't hurt you." But I could see that he knew it was lazy and he saw right through it. He saw that we desperately needed help and we were exhausted. But he took a step back and he let us feel like we were in control, as if he couldn't just run away on his horse and leave us stranded here. He just said, "Boys, follow me in your golf cart. Focus on the back of my horse your entire ride. Don't slow down and don't lose focus." This made me trust him a little bit more because he was clearly aware about whatever drowsy state occurs when you try to travel here. And he was giving us tools to fight it. He just said, "Look at the back of my horse, focus on it, it'll help." Junior never did that. He just let us doze off and wander around aimlessly. I wasn't ready to give him my full trust, but it was a green flag for sure. And right before we start moving, he looks back at us and just says, "You two leave the second I get you back to headquarters. Do you understand? Why in the world would we want to stay here? Obviously, we were gonna leave the second we saw the exit." And we just look at him like, "Yeah, dude, of course we're leaving." And he just takes that as his cue to start moving. And he's wasting no time. He gets his horse up to a full gallop again, the same way that he did when he was approaching us. And Sam had to floor this golf cart in order to keep up. And I was just trying my absolute best to stay focused on the horse in front of us and just do my best to stay as sharp as possible, but it was so draining. It was as if the landscape on either side of us was just warping and changing as we were passing. It got to the point where it felt like the horse that I was staring at was the only thing that was staying still and everything else was shaking. And each side of the road just started rising until there was a steep hill on either side of us, about 45-degree angles on either side, as if we were driving through one of those flood control channels in California, but the hills were dirt instead of concrete. As we kept driving, it felt like the pressure around us was just rising, as if we were fighting off G-force. It was an absolute battle to not black out, and it felt like my face was filling with blood. And I was on the brink of losing consciousness until I saw somebody from the corner of my eye running down the hill, and they're just running straight down, angling towards our vehicle. I couldn't tell if it was an optical illusion at first, but I knew it was real once I heard the person shouting. shouting. It was a grown man running towards us, waving his arms in the air, just shouting, "There you are." As we got closer, I started to realize who it was. And not just because of the voice, it's because we started to slow down and our surroundings started fading back to normal instead of being in this warped state, so it was pretty clear who it was. We were going about half speed now, watching Tim reveal himself for the first time since the homestead. And he's acting so excited to see us, trying to get our attention in a friendly way. But we weren't planning on stopping this vehicle for him. We started to speed up to avoid him. But as we started to speed up, his facial expression changed, and his arms go from over his head waving at us to at his sides pumping like the pistons of an engine sprinting at us. He went from an uncoordinated jog with his hands over his head to running at us like he's Daphne. And I don't mean Daphne from Scooby-Doo, I mean Daphne from that meme, where all those girls are taking turns running on the treadmill, and all the girls look like they're running away from something hunting them. Except Daphne. Daphne looks like she's doing the hunting. Tim turned from friendly, quirky scientist to RoboCop once he saw that we didn't trust him. We try to pick up speed to get around him, but he's got the angle on us, and he's running straight towards the front right corner of our golf cart. So I pick up my right leg and I brace myself in the cart, ready to kick him if he tries to pull us from the vehicle. But I don't have to. As he was a couple feet away, Sam swerved towards him a little bit. It's like he pump faked, pretending like he was going to run him over. He wasn't going to run him over, but he wanted to make him think he was to deter him with a spastic movement. But it scared Tim and it caused him to misstep and trip. And he did one of those falls where he's falling forward for like 4 long steps. So he still closed the distance between us, but unfortunately, he cracked his head off the front of the golf cart. And it wasn't a minor bump. His face clapped off the hood of this car, and he just went limp, falling off to the right side. We ran over his leg for sure because we felt a major speed bump after he fell over to the right. Every fiber of my being wanted to just keep going and leave this place. But I just couldn't justify letting somebody die, especially when we witnessed the accident ourselves. No matter how weird and cultish they are, I wouldn't be able to live with myself just leaving this guy. And Sam must have felt the same way because he screeched to a stop. And the ranch hand stopped as well, and he turned around and he trotted up to us on his horse, and the first thing he said to us was, "The headquarters is right ahead. Somebody will find him. You should leave him there." And right when he said that the headquarters was right ahead of us, Sam and I swung our heads around to see, and he wasn't lying. The headquarters was right ahead of us, about 50 yards ahead to the right of the road. And yes, it was to the right of the road, which means that we pulled up in the same direction that we showed up when we first arrived, which means the exit gate is directly behind us, which it couldn't be because we'd been driving straight for hours. But when I turned around, there it was. The exit gate was there, the same gate that we came in through. And you'd think that that would sway us and we'd just leave Tim so we could leave as soon as we possibly could. But that's just not how you feel in those types of situations. Maybe we would have left him here if we were still back by the lake, or if we were still out front of the doghouse. Because back there, we might have felt so trapped that we were just like, we need to just keep going. But there's something about knowing that the exit is right there. I could see it. And it gives you a new level of confidence and comfort. We knew that we could leave at any moment now, so everything feels a little bit less intimidating. The thought about dropping him off at headquarters and telling off the Boston workers before we left was actually the cherry on top of leaving to us. We weren't trapped in their bizarre game anymore, so our confidence started flooding back in. And Sam just replies to the ranch hand, "Nah, load him in. This poor guy's life is bad enough being stuck in this cult. Let's not make it any worse. Plus, I'd like to let the boss know what I think about him before we leave." But then I noticed Sam spotted something behind the ranch hand. I see him looking at it curiously before letting out a little smirk. Then I just see him start thinking out loud. And Sam just goes, "Actually, I think I'll let him know what I think about him right now." And I was half expecting to see the boss running towards us in the same RoboCop fashion as Tim was. But instead, I see a big wooden post with about 5 cameras just drilled into it facing in every direction. And Sam just walks right up to this pillar, face to face with one of the cameras, just cussing out the boss as if he's listening in on this conversation. I just flicked off the camera from where I was standing, and Sam was basically face to face with this camera just talking smack to it. And Sam finished one of his jokes with something along the lines of, "Study this," before he abruptly stopped. It sounded as if he saw something that made him go silent in the moment. And I'm just looking at Sam's back, but it looks as if he's deeply inspecting this camera, as if he's trying to look behind the lens. And then he started picking at it. I couldn't see what he was doing exactly at first until I stepped a little bit off the road to get a better angle. And then I see it. He's peeling something off the lens. There was literally something covering the camera lens. Then he crumpled whatever it was into his hand and went on to the next camera. And then he peeled something off that lens as well. And then he proceeded to do it to every single lens that was on the post. And I'm just standing there waiting patiently for his explanation. Then he finally turned around, just holding up sticky still images of the entire ranch's landscape. And I was so confused at first. And then Sam started talking. He just goes, they're all covered with a still image of what they're pointed at. So all of those monitors that are inside the headquarters aren't recording anything. Tim just spends all day staring at still images. And the rancher just cuts him off in a hushed tone. They stopped doing science here a long time ago. Tim's still on the floor out cold, so I try to wake him up by giving him a little kick in the ribs while repeating his name. Tim, come on Tim, wake up. And the rancher cuts me off in the same tone as he used before. He just goes, his name's Conrad, not Tim. And I roll my eyes because I really don't care what these guys' names are. I don't care that they changed their name for this cult. I'm just trying to wake this dude up so I don't have to lift his dead weight into the golf cart. But I entertain the ranch hand's correction. I just go, come on, wake up, Conrad. I was planning on following up that sentence with something playful like, get up, it's time for school. But the second I finished the word Conrad, his eyes popped open. He looked alert and awake. And he started screaming, leave, leave, leave before he finds you. And I try to answer him, trying to calm him down. I'm just like, bro, you had a bad fall. Don't worry, we're gonna take care of you. We're gonna get you back to headquarters and clean you up. He didn't like that idea at all. He started violently shaking and he started mumbling something along the lines of, he's everyone, he's everyone. But then his mumbles just faded into whispers and he just went back to being totally unconscious. This guy was clearly severely concussed and potentially having a brain bleed. He cracked his head off this vehicle. Realistically, we could not wait around. We had to get this guy some help and get him back to headquarters. Sam and I just started loading him into the backseat of the golf cart, and I could feel the ranch hand looking at us, and I could feel the disappointment in our decision to actually help this guy. The reality was that the headquarters was right ahead of us, and all we had to do was carry him inside. And then it's all their responsibility. We would just slip out as they all started tending to him, and we'd be gone before they noticed. So we drove the extra 50 yards until we were right in front of headquarters. And I'm just peering in through the windows, and I'm trying to see if there's anybody in there peeking out. I just want to see if anybody's in there getting ready to ambush us with some cult propaganda. But I see something even worse than plotting cult members. I didn't see anybody. There's no movement coming from inside the building. And for some reason, that was more of a nightmare than all of them in the window staring back at us. It was scary because it made me doubt if this was the real headquarters. And I started to think that this might be another one of those traps of the wrench. Just another stop on this freaky tour meant to break us. And the confidence in me started to fade pretty fast, and part of me wanted to just leave Tim in the golf cart and get out of here. But it just wasn't morally right. If this guy didn't get real medical attention fast, he might be permanently damaged. Morally, we could not leave him. We had to get him out of the cart, pick him up by his shoulders and feet, and walk him in through that front door. And I try my best to look around as I'm backpedaling, holding his shoulders, seeing if there's anybody in here. But it was a ghost town in there. We walk him over to one of those lab tables in there, and we just lay him across, and I made sure to peek around tables and corners just to make sure that nobody's hiding from us. I was expecting a large group of fanatical cult members running to Tim's aid, but this lab was completely empty. The thing that struck me as the most odd though is that everything in the lab was still on. All the lights and machines and computers, they were on as if everybody that was in the lab rushed out just minutes earlier without doing any closing protocols or shutting anything off. So I look at Sam to see if he's thinking what I'm thinking, and he has the same look on his face as I do. It was the face of a man that wanted answers, and if nobody was gonna give us answers to our face, we were gonna find these answers in their lab. So we started snooping around, and I'm not gonna sit here and pretend that we did it respectfully. I treated that place like I owned it. Opening drawers, flipping through data sheets, reading reports, anything that we could find, I was looking through. And we realized really quickly that none of the lab work really meant anything to us. Even if there were big discoveries in these notes, we're not scientists, so we couldn't even really decipher what these meant. The only things that we really found odd in this lab were the names of their equipment. The two microscopes that they had in there, like on display, were named Adam and Eve, and they had a soil sampling system named Cain. Every single high-tech item in this lab had a biblical name. Literally everything about this place was just so cultish, but that was the most interesting things that we could find in. So we figured that we should go to Tim's office, where it's just pretty straightforward. There's cameras and there should be footage on these computers of the bizarre things that they've recorded and found. There should be proof in these rooms, and on these computers there should be some type of footage that is recording these weird and bizarre things that are happening on this ranch on a daily basis. So we storm into their surveillance room, and we turn the corner, and I'm looking for somebody, but nobody's hiding in there either. And we're just standing in there scanning all the screens and all the camera angles. And right away, it's very clear that this room is a dead end as well. Since Sam peeled those still images off those cameras out front, we could clearly see the difference between those that were peeled and those that weren't. It was a very clear difference once you could compare the two. When nothing in any of the footage is moving, it doesn't look too fake on screen. But once you have a point of reference to compare the still images to, it is so obvious. It seemed as if if every single camera on this ranch, which seemed to be well over 200 of them, had a still image sticker stuck on the lens and wasn't recording anything. These men that were here weren't trying to prove a thing. They were here pretending to be the men searching for evidence, when the entire time they were just covering it up. They were doing the best that they could to hide what is happening here from the general public, and they clearly had no interest in gathering data or evidence. These sick freaks use this ranch as a way to break people to join their cult. They act like they don't want trespassers, so when people show up, they can make those people feel special and chosen. And that's why they tried to butter us up the way they did. That's why they all sounded like they were telling stories from a script. They clearly have a system that they use to recruit people, and they use this bizarre ranch and the lore behind it to their advantage. And the icing on the cake was that the big computer that they used to store all the video files and evidence had a big name tag on it. The computer was named Satan, Satan. Disgusting. So I'm starting to have all these realizations all at once, and I could feel the anger starting in my diaphragm and raising into my chest all at once. I wanted to rip this lab to pieces and burn it to the ground for what they've been doing to these poor people. Sam grabs my shoulder. He could see that I'm pissed, and he just starts telling me that we should go. But as we turn around to leave, we see Tim just walk right past the doorway. It was almost like we saw a ghost. That dude was out cold where we left him. But the way that he was walking wasn't normal. It wasn't like somebody that just woke up from a head injury or his leg getting run over. You think he'd have a limp or be falling over himself. The way that he was walking was robotic. It just lacked personality. Tim was the type of guy that walked on his tippy toes and just bounced with every step. But he walked past this doorway as if he was on one of those flat escalators that you find at the airport, and he's barely swinging his arms, but he's moving. We froze momentarily, but we heard him open a door right around the corner, and we thought he was going in there to do that disappearing trick again, so we immediately hustled to get to him before he could close that door. We just wanted to get a glimpse of how they do it, or we wanted to stop him from doing it so we could question him a little bit more. He had no intention on disappearing behind that door because he left it wide open, basically inviting us in. He walked into the room where our testimony was supposed to take place, but the boss had a meeting in there before we were able to do it. And the room was eerily similar to the aesthetic of the doghouse. It looked like the room where the back rooms finally end. This room looks like the interrogation room from every serial killer doc ever. Honestly, it looked like we shouldn't be turning this corner to get a glimpse of where Tim's walking to, but we did anyway. We were looking for answers here. So we step into this doorway to find where all the scientists are hiding. Part of me thought that they were hiding from us because they saw us peel the stickers off the cameras, and they were scared of our reaction, rightfully so. I realized in that moment that they were not scared of us, and that they were not a cult. These scientists were not even people. Every man that we had seen working in the lab earlier that day was standing in the middle of this room in a tight circle, all of them breathing in unison. They were all just heavily breathing, leaning backward and forward as if they were all just one big organism at rest. They were moving like the I Am Legend zombies when they hibernate during the day. The only difference is that these guys are all in lab coats and suits. And another key difference is that they were all humming or buzzing in unison, and it would go from loud to soft as they would lean forward and back. The buzzing sound sounded like when all the cicadas hatch at once and they just dominate a summer. And then I turned my attention from this group of guys to the back wall, and I noticed that the back wall is just jet black, and it seems as if it just goes on forever. It looked like an endless black void with an odd texture that just seemed to be constantly moving. It looked like blackness folding in on itself endlessly. But inside of the texture on this wall, there were faint features that resembled some type of face. It looked like a living entity somehow. The closest thing I could compare it to is Dormammu from Doctor Strange, but that isn't really doing it justice for how sinister it looked. And when my eyes finally focused in onto the details of this wall, it's like it spotted me seeing it, and every man in the room froze for a moment before they stopped swaying and whipped their heads towards us. All of these guys started speaking simultaneously as if the entity that I'm seeing on this wall is speaking through them, and every single one of them said,
"For every question we have an answer, walk through the veil. For every question we have an answer, walk through the veil."
Over and over and over again, as if the repetition was going to sway our decision. By the fourth time they repeated it, I took my first step back, and the moment they saw that I wasn't taking a step forward, they stopped speaking. They frantically exploded from completely still to complete action, and so did we. We sprinted out of the lab and through the front door as dozens of scientists chased us. Some were crawling out of the front door behind us, as others were stomping over them chasing us, and some were even throwing themselves out of the window to get the jump on us. They were just falling over themselves with how viciously they were pursuing us. And the second we were out of the headquarters, the ranch hand knew exactly what was happening, and he just yelled for us to run towards the gate. He was still on his horse, just galloping by our side as we're sprinting, and he's doing his best to try to get in between us and the scientists chasing us. I look over my shoulder as I'm in a full sprint, and it is just pure chaos behind us. There's a horde of these men sprinting towards us, and the commotion that they started has dozens of exotic birds just fluttering overhead, and I could see in the distance multiple big blue meanies making their way over the mountains and zipping in our direction. And I'm seeing the sky, and it looks like it has cracks in it, and pieces are falling out like a broken mirror, but behind the cracks it's revealing a different sky, as if it's nighttime behind our sky. But I can't just keep staring at it. I have to turn my head back forward and focus on just getting to the fence. I could feel the horse of the rancher right behind me, and I could hear the predatory breaths of the scientist just a couple feet behind him. So we get to the fence and we start to scale it as fast as possible. I basically jump into the middle of this fence. We both just leap to the middle of it, and we drag our torsos over the top just to get most of our weight onto the other side. We don't even try to climb over clean. We just get our torsos over it and we free fall to the dirt. But as we're falling, everything around us starts to slow down, and I'm just falling head first, and I'm facing back towards the ranch as I'm falling straight down, and it looks as if everything's happening frame by frame in slow motion. And I felt what I could only describe as like invisible plastic wrap pressing onto my head and arms as I'm bracing myself to impact the floor. I felt as if the air itself was resisting me falling down until it finally let me break through, and I hit the floor surprisingly soft, and I spring to my feet immediately in pure panic to help Sam if I need to. I'm trying to be as fast as I can in case we need to continue our escape, but there's nothing to run from. Everything around us is quiet and calm. We're looking back through this fence into a completely empty road, and this road is just leading into a desolate ranch that looks mundane and ordinary. And I start rubbing my eyes because I feel like something is wrong with them, but then I realized it's just because they went back to normal. My vision was no longer altered, so I turn towards the road and I see my phone propped up on the water bottle as if we didn't leave. I pick it up and it's completely dead, so we just have to walk to the car because we don't know how long we've been in there, and we see the clock on the car says it's 12 p.m. And for some reason, at no point did I consider what time it was, and I realized that the sun had never changed position while we were in there. I don't know why I didn't notice it at the time, but in hindsight, it was clear that it never moved. It was directly overhead for hours. We had entered the ranch at 11 a.m. the day before, and it's noon the next day, and we were so lucky that the 4Runner's battery didn't die, or we would be stranded out here with 2 dead phones. And Sam and I spent the next 3 hours just trying to make sense of what we just experienced. But 3 hours wasn't nearly enough time to talk, especially when I knew that I left Jess in a random hotel in Salt Lake City while she's sick, and I didn't check in with her for an entire day. We pulled up to our hotel, and Sam and I just agreed to continue the conversation another time. I sprinted through the lobby and I went upstairs to get to Jess as fast as I could, because she was probably freaking out and even considering calling the police. So I burst through our hotel door and I just start profusely apologizing to her for leaving her here and not checking in the night before, even though I said I'd be back by nighttime. And she's just pushing me off of her, drowsy and super confused. And I think that she's about to give me a scolding of a lifetime and just doesn't want me to touch her for making her so nervous, but she just says, "What are you talking about? You've only been gone for like 6 hours."